Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Good day and welcome to the podcast. This is CampHacker episode 122, recorded on the 22nd of January, 2020. On today's show, the future of summer camp. This CampHacker podcast is sponsored in part by RadTags. Designed by a former camp owner and director, RadTags is about connecting people to who they are, the camp they love, and the accomplishments they experience there. RadTags bracelets and tags help your camp community stay connected to their happiest place. Find out what RadTags has to offer your camp at zoic.ca/rad. That's zoic.ca/rad. Also, don't forget to visit RadTags at the ACA National Camp Conference. Be one of the first 50 people to booth 522 for a special gift from RadTags and Go Camp Pro. RadTags. Be and be known. Finally, if you've gotten even one good idea from the CampHacker podcast, and I bet you have, we'd be super grateful if you left us a review. It's really easy to. Just go to ratethispodcast.com/camp. That's ratethispodcast.com/camp, and it'll get you started. Thanks for letting your awesome out, Camp Mavericks. We hope you enjoy the CampHacker show.
Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I'm a summer camp marketing and strategy consultant, and I also run the Summer Camp Professionals group on Facebook, and I would like to welcome you to the CampHacker podcast.
Hello, my name is Dan Weir, and I have over 2 decades of experience working in YMCA camping. I currently work for the YMCA of Long Island as their senior director in developing programming. So I basically bounce around and develop our day camps.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive female community for both our staff and our campers.
My name's Joe Richards. I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility, and I do stuff.
And hello, my name is Stacy Simpson, and I am a consultant and trainer for summer camps and Girl Scout councils, as well as small businesses and for entrepreneurs. So I'm excited to be joining in today.
And we're grateful to have you back, Stacy. Some of my favorite topics were suggested by you or you and Corey, so it's nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks.
We wanted to talk today about the future. Wanted to talk about being strategic about the future, thinking about the future. And so I brought this group together and asked them to consider what are the things that help them make good decisions about the future. I came across some interesting piece of thoughtful work from Camp Alumni Seth Godin, who said there's you can make good decisions and there are good outcomes, and sometimes they have nothing to do with the other. All you have to do is do your best to make good decisions, and then the good outcomes you will only find out later. So I thought it would be nice to spend some time talking about how to make good decisions about what the future of your camp is. I really was thinking about the future of buildings and programs, but I really want to encourage all listeners to be open about the future, to do the work and look at things from a logical perspective, as well as sort of encouraging you to dream big. And this has really come up for us in Ontario camps here right now because there's some big job action. The teachers union in our province covers the whole province. It's not just, we don't have a whole bunch of teachers union, we have one, and there's big job action going on right now. And how that affects camps is about camps who have the ability or the interest in running programs to help with those kids who aren't in school. And also that's having a huge effect on spring programming at camps and camps that depend on schools coming out to their camps in the spring before their summer kids arrive. And that's having a big unbalancing effect right now because of that. And I think that an honest and open evaluation of the future as an outdoor ed center might be some big questions asked as we look at the outcome of this. And I think this is, Joe, maybe you can remember, but this is probably the third or fourth time in 10 years there's been big job action that would affect outdoor ed. It's at least 3.
Yeah, it's not, a lot of them haven't come to fruition. A lot of them have, a lot of these job actions have threatened to come to fruition. The last time that it really truly was a 0 people coming to camp for school programming in June, at least, would be as far back as 2005. The other ones limited the numbers coming, but it didn't stop everyone from coming in the end. So,
but it does often affect when teachers aren't taking on the extra things like planning trips. School trips obviously can't happen on in a very short turnaround. So that does affect the planning in lots of different ways.
Yeah, the planning is a struggle for us as camps if we want staff on site. But it also, part of your future vision, our future vision is the idea of going to them, because a lot of our outdoor ed centers only work on an overnight schedule. They don't work on the day schedule. And we at Pierce, because we're so close to London, Ontario, we've done many of our things with day only. So for us to go to their school and run the program for the day isn't job action oriented, because the teachers are going to be at work anyway, and they save the busing cost. So we do add a bit of cost on for our travel, but in the end, it's all about adjusting to what's available.
Right.
Yeah.
Dan, I know a big part of your job is considering the future, evaluating current programs, looking at places to make improvements and changes. What's been your philosophy, whether in this job or your Frost Valley job, in thinking about how you evaluate things for future use?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts about this topic, so I'm going to just kind of narrowly answer your question. So you asked about evaluating. I think the key is that you find some metric that you can really prioritize, for lack of better words. Not every camp is going to have the same goal. Not every program is necessarily driven the same way. You could always argue that you're driven by finances, and you need kids in beds or kids in spots in order to do that. But that's not often what attracts the passion of people and what really goes for in terms of camp. And I really believe that the best thing that we could all do as camp professionals is just run the best program possible, and to really figure out what makes it the best. So in terms of evaluating, I really look for what is kind of our main focus of the program. What do we want kids to be walking away with? And also recognizing that kids don't necessarily have all the buying power, and that this isn't just about the child's experience, it's about the family's experience, it's also about your staff's experience. So I really try to evaluate, to kind of concisely answer your question, evaluate based off of the kid's experience, the family's experience, and then the staff's experience, and have those in 3 different buckets, and then see what overlaps and see what is kind of an outlier for one group versus the other. Really helps me kind of understand the full picture.
Stacy, I think a cool part of your job, which is very similar to my job, is the perspective on a whole bunch of different organizations. What's sort of your first ask of a camp or a council or an organization that you're trying to push to get to realistically evaluate some of their future program and physical plant decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a bunch of different kind of lenses that you can look at this through, and some options or directions are going to really line up with certain criteria, and others are not. So to kind of try to look at it from every angle. So I think one of the main things for a lot of camps and organizations that I'm talking with is what's really feasible. So I think something that we talk about is, have we tried this before, even on like a micro level, and did that work? And then can we scale it to be bigger? So that's talking more in terms of program than site probably. But to think about like, what have we done and what has worked? What did maybe we try it once or twice and we liked it. So let's dig into it and try and take it to that next step and see what that does for us. So kind of in terms of, and I mean, I think you think about that in terms of logistics, in terms of budget and financially, is it sustainable in terms of the money side of things too? And then I think for it's particularly with Girl Scouts, which is a lot of the folks that I work with, Girl Scout councils, there is an umbrella of research and programmatic outcomes and information that we can pull from that is available to us in order to kind of provide some of that structure. And then we can decide locally or regionally for our campers, how do we fit into that with the resources that we have? So let's see what resources are available to us already, and then where can we move within that to kind of bring it to the next level. So I'm always kind of looking like what's at our fingertips, and then where do we go from there, basically.
That's awesome. So, Gab, we're in an interesting situation, and you've made some really smart choices because of it, but you're very physically limited because the size of the property is small, but you have built new buildings, you've taken buildings down, and you have done program changes in the last 10 years. What's some of the frameworks within which you look at those decisions at Waro?
I think, so our camp is it's 14 acres. It is a tiny camp. We have neighbors on either side. We can't move anywhere. And I think the first things first is to understand your limitations and, how many kids can you have and how can you maximize with those numbers. And even when we're looking at staff, even if we have a budget to hire more staff, we don't have the beds or the spaces to hire those staff members. We can't even put up a tent somewhere. So first and foremost is just be happy with what you have, and then see what you can do within that. And then secondly, and I've said this many times before, but don't think of yourself as a summer camp. Think of yourself as what's your core value? What are you trying to offer? And allow your programs and your site to try to reflect that. So we just built a new building. It's not finished yet, but we started it a couple of years ago. And we really want to look at it as a multi-purpose building that would fit our campers, our staff members at different times, different days, as well as other groups throughout the summer. And how does that look and feel match all individuals, as long as we're sticking to our core value of community and empowerment, et cetera, et cetera. So sort of understand what your limitations are, and then also don't pigeonhole yourself into I'm a summer camp and that's what we need to stick to. What is your actual greater purpose? What is your broader outreach, so that you are not limiting yourself past your physical site?
And that sounds like some great evaluation tools too for everything, like being real clarity, as you and Dan both said, real clarity on your vision and your purpose allows you to be as creative as possible.
The idea is also not to never limit your thinking based on what you have. So this is a program trick that I teach staff all the time, is we should never say, this is what we have, so this is what we can do. You should approach a program problem from what do we want to do and how do we make it happen with what we have. And it sounds like such a small change, but it's a huge change, because you can create the Titanic if that's what you're going for, without buying a boat to create the Titanic. You can create things around by shifting your mindset to we can make whatever we want come true program-wise if we use our imagination and creativity. And I find that as people think about the futures of their sites or their programs, sometimes that's the limiting factor for them, is that they think about what they don't have or what another camp has. My personal thing is I have plans on being a great woodworker. But I always think, well, if I just had this tool will make me the great woodworker. And the reality is, I don't need that tool. I just need to go cut wood and put stuff together, right? Like that's what I need to start doing. I don't need more fancy tools. I just need to make it happen with what I have. So, yeah.
And I think that, Joe, you've said, a couple of times before, with your camp, there isn't a lake. And you had once told me, that you laugh at camp directors that they need to find a camp with a lake. And it's such a limited way of thinking. Camp is not based around a lake. Camp isn't based around, starry nights. And once you get past that hurdle, and I'll admit, I was also, when you had said that to me, I said, I would really have a hard time to run a camp without a lake, but it did get me in the process of thinking, how would I create our quote unquote camp magic in a parking lot? What would that look like? And how could I feel good at the end of the day? Not only good, but inspired and excited. And why would my staff feel excited and inspired, and my campers as well? So trying to break yourself outside of that mindset is very important, I think, for the success of your organization.
And I think the future of things is often thought of in terms of where your history comes from. So if you grew up at a camp on a lake and your best memories are based on sitting on a beach, listening to the sound of the waves, then you could be stuck in a rut to say, well, I need the lake. When in actuality, an awesome camp, give me 8 kids a ball in an open field and I can create camp. And if we forget the ball, I'm probably good as well, right? Like I think that's a quote from an old CCA magazine, but yeah.
One of the things that strikes me from the stuff that people have said is that we often set our own limits on development and what could be. And in this discussion, as well as most camp discussions, it grinds to a quick and sudden end as soon as somebody says, but we've always done it this way. And the first people who can come back and say, so what, are often the ones that break open the discussion and really push. And I do want to talk about some purposeful and real things, but I think it's so important to start with mindset and openness and consideration of what is possible. What are we not looking at that we should be looking at? What have we never considered before that could change so many different things, as well as where can we draw inspiration from that is not, as Joe said, our camp's history or even other camps that look just like us.
Yeah, I just don't think if you only look at other camps, then you're still stuck, right? Like this is where I've said time and time again, we need to pay attention to what's going on outside of our own industry as well to see where we're missing a niche or a program or a new design that could change everything. I'm not sure if people saw it, but I'll try and find it before for the show notes. But in the Tokyo Olympics, they're using cardboard beds. How awesome is that?
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
That's pretty cool.
I think there's so much inspiration and creativity that we can draw from our parents and our campers too, when it comes to getting outside of our own headspace and outside of what we've always known. I mean, just as a small example, 2 days ago was a holiday in the US. Yesterday, it must have been, we were on our way to school and our 12-year-old said, you know what we should do at camp? Because my husband is a camp director. You know what we should do at camp is we should have like a pirate ship in the middle of the lake. And I was like, yes, we should do that. Like, I would have never thought of that, but that's an epic idea. I'm sure some camps are doing it, but where he came up with that, I have no idea. We weren't talking about anything related. We were listening to podcasts, but there was nothing related to it. It just came out of his mind, right? Because he's got a camper's imagination as a 12-year-old boy. So how, the thought of how can we kind of dissect or get into the minds of campers and parents and their imaginations too, and add that into to make our thought process even bloom further.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I could offer to a camp who's seriously considering their future is to spend time before the brainstorm that everybody thinks of, and start with, here are the things that are limiting our discussion, like acknowledge the things that are limiting the discussion. We're limited by tradition. We're limited by people who say we don't do that here, or we've always done that here, and just acknowledge some of those things going forward. I'll start to change things a bit, but I want to see if anybody else had any more thoughts on sort of philosophy setting this up, really opening your consideration and to possibilities.
I think, Travis, you said earlier this idea that just if the words, we've always done it that way. An old friend that most of us know, or that the Canadians would know, is Jim Penner. Is it Jim Penner from Silver Lake? Who said the dying words of a church are, we've always done it that way. And so if you're in religious camping like I am, and you see your churches that have supported you go lower and like just fewer and fewer and fewer, it's because they're unwilling to change or adapt. And that's, I think, a great place to put in front of summer camps as well.
Gab, it looked like you had a thought.
Oh, I was just going to say that, and I've said this before as well. So, but I think it's important within your organization to adapt the philosophy that change is part of your history. So whether you've been a camp around for 150 years or for 4 years, that you talk about that change is part of our history, and you name the things that your camp has done, you name the things that your camp has shifted, and to acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us, and that the work that they did before us was so that we can do better work and stronger work, and we're always building. That's our philosophy. And I think all organizations that change is part of our history. It doesn't mean that we're changing our value system, doesn't mean we're changing our mission statement, but to keep always getting closer to that mission statement, we need to evolve.
There's a great book that we covered in one of the other podcasts that we did, but the 5 most important questions by you'll ever ask your organization by Peter Drucker. I'll just read the 5 questions, but you should be able to answer these questions before you go into the design phase. So what is our mission? Who is our customer? What does the customer value? What are our results? And what is our plan? I think if you could answer those 5 questions, the ideas that will generate from that will be limitless. It really is that fundamental.
So Dan, I'll go right straight back to you and say, what do you think are some of the things that camps need to be thinking about, considering when planning for a programmatic future or a building future, et cetera?
Yeah. So I wrote down a few things. One is with the design process, really understand the phrase, nothing for us without us. It's a movement in terms of program design for people that might have a disability or diverse ability or be on the spectrum. But people need to be in the room that are going to be using the program or developing the building or in any aspect, right? And one is to make sure people are heard. There's a need to be heard, but also to recognize that if you're not the user, then how can you be designing something to be used properly? And to really understand that you need somebody in there. Like if you're designing a cabin and you're not thinking about the American Disabilities Act, where you need to have somebody coming in with a wheelchair and have the right access, then you're not really thinking about everyone. So I think it's important with the design process that you really understand the phrase "nothing for us without us." Really understand what that means. Second is, I would say the biggest threat to any camp or any organization is your own ego, and to really understand that you might not know everything, and it's okay. If we were to know everything, then we would never need any person ever in our team, and that's just ridiculous. So figuring out how to challenge without being negative, how to rank your priorities. You can't have everything that you want. It's just a matter of life, and to know that you need to figure out what is that top priority. And sometimes we have this and/or /, but even with that, there is going to be a top priority. I work with a lot of nonprofits at times, and and they forget about the fiduciary responsibility of being around for the next year. And they say, no, that's not who we are. That's not what it is. We don't want to be a for-profit company. And my reply to that is that, if you're not bringing in enough income to sustain yourself to be there next year or to pay your employees, frankly, you're not being a steward. You're not being responsible. So I think it's important that you figure out how to rank your priorities. I'm not saying exploit and pack every bed and pack every kid into every little seat and crevice. You obviously need to know what your tipping point and quality is, but just understand your ego can get in the way more than you know, and to know that if you bring in people that challenge you, you go the right way. I was thinking about Abraham Lincoln, and in terms of he brought in people that had different thoughts than him, people he fundamentally didn't agree with, but it challenged him and challenged his presidency to be better. So there's that, and then the last one I have here is just that. Reflecting on recently reading Originals by Adam Grant. One of the parts of the book he talked about, it's okay to copy. It's okay to be original by starting off where someone else left. It's okay to copy at first and then to make it your own, and to not necessarily think of originality as blazing your own path. I supervised somebody that was extremely talented and very diligent, great in terms of thinking long term, but it would always get hung up on his own originality and would say he is not original. He would tell people all the time he's not original. But if he walked in and saw you developing something, could come in and help you develop it in a way that you didn't think of. And it challenged him a lot to think about his originality differently than just coming up with original ideas. Sometimes it's taking something and making an enhancement, making a change that's going to make it for the better. So it's okay to copy. It's okay to whether it's from a camp or it's a post office or it's a theme park or, it's okay to copy at first to get your fundamental understanding into where to enhance from here. So yeah, those are my three overall thoughts on design.
Dan, you said something that comes out often in my work, and sometimes it's Stacy. I wonder if this is the same thing that happens with you. Is that people think they're hiring a consultant to give them answers, and I think the consultant's real job is to ask questions. And this often happens to like design things where people will be like, "What do you think, Travis? Do you like this?" And I have to repeatedly say, "It doesn't matter." Well, I'm here to help you ask the questions of the people who are actually going to use it. I'm a 50-year-old guy from Woodstock, Ontario, Canada. I am not a young family from San Diego that you're selling to. Let's go to them and ask them. And so I really like your not about us, without us, Dan. I think that's great and can lead to some really great sensitivity around this.
Yeah. Just that thought, that actual phrase came out of working with the Young Adult Institute, which is a large nonprofit in Manhattan, and they really believe in basically supporting people with a disability or diverse ability or on the spectrum from birth to death. And I learned that phrase from them in terms of universal design. The best part about universal design is that everyone can use it, but the only way to get to universal design is to have people in the room that would be using it.
Anybody else have some philosophical advice just to wrap up that section before we move on to some practical things that you would really want people to, a new camp director or someone who's facing a new challenge like this, you really want them to consider?
I think my big consideration would be that you are too short-sighted, right? Like, accept that now, because what you're not thinking about 20 years down the road, you're not thinking about 30 years down the road. This is a concept I have said on this podcast before. We talk about, we at Pierce talk about the phrase, today's camper's camper. So is your camp going to be around for today's camper's camper? So today's 7-year-old's 7-year-old. So 27 years from now, well, are you making a decision? And there are lots of young people or camp directors who are really new in their job who don't pay enough respect to that, because they feel like, well, if I don't sort out the now, I can't sort out the then, which is fine. I totally accept that. If you don't get your finances in order now, you're not going to be around. But when you make a decision to put in water lines, probably put in the high pressure water lines versus the farmer's volunteer water line, right? Because you're going to prevent someone 27 years from now from cursing your name and blaming you and throwing you under the bus, right? Or if you're going to get a building built, get a building permit so that there's a paper trail, so that at least when your building inspector dies and the new building inspector, 10 years from now is like, well, when did you build this building? And you're like, well, it's always been there, right? So I think I think it's that idea of long-term vision. I know research has shown in United Church of Canada camps, research has shown that 85% of our camp directors are less than 2 years in their position at our 55 camps across the country. And only one who answered the survey is a 10 plus year, and that would be me. And I even think at 15 years in, I don't know enough, right? I'm still correcting issues I caused for myself 15 years ago. But when when you buy something like a metal door for a building, buy a metal door, buy an industrial metal door. Don't go to the hardware store and buy a cheap house door, because if 1,000 campers use it every summer and 10,000 people at different rental groups use it, you want a door that's going to be there for at least 15, 20, 25 years that you'll never think about. So I think that long-term thinking is something that future-proofing almost. So Dan's comment, nothing for us without us. I love the idea of, I use the term future-proof. I don't ever want to have a government agency tell me I need to change something. I need to make that door 4 inches wider. Or I need to put an elevator down because everybody needs to get to the basement I put in, right? Any of those things, right? So my current policy is to put in 42-inch doors when we replace doors, which means we reframe, and people are like, that's crazy. And I was like, yeah, but nobody's going to tell me I need to change it. Right? So that future proofing, if you have the ability to think through it and really plan for someone ahead of you. We are stewards of our properties and our programs at this moment in time, and we need to leave them better than we found them.
This episode of the CampHacker podcast is sponsored by Rad Tags. Rad Tags is outfitting camps with personalized keepsakes that speak without saying a word. Rad Tags allows you to show someone they belong, building a relationship that goes beyond their last day at camp. With the goal of helping camps create awesome recognition and affiliate programs that last beyond the summer, Rad Tags is doing a monthly giveaway for Go Camp Pro listeners. Just email your answer to the following question to matt@gocamp.pro and be entered to win 5 silicone bracelets with the Rad hand sign. Each month, we'll pick a new winner. This month's question is there value in creating a program where camp merchandise is given for special milestones or accomplishments at camp? How do you do this? Don't forget, email your answer to matt@gocamp.pro with Rad Tags contest in the subject line. To find out more about how Rad Tags can elevate your camp program, visit zoic.ca/rad. That's zoic.ca/RAD. Rad Tags. Be and be known. Thank you. So I wonder, from your perspective, I mean, we have a lot of years of camp experience on this call, and that means that we've seen a lot of changes. It also means that, and it also means that we may not have the freshest perspective on camp, and that's worth considering too. How do we get new perspectives on things? But I wonder, from your experience, what do you think are some of the issues around program and physical plant that are coming that we need to be aware of? Gab, what sort of things do you think?
what we're thinking about right now is how to make our site multi-purpose in every aspect of our site. So how can we transform the dining room? How can we transform our lodge? How can we transform our new building called Le Chalet? How can it be multi-purpose and not just for one thing? How can archery we don't want archery to just be the archery field. And how do we make it multi-purpose almost every inch of our camp? And that's an exercise that I've done with our staff members, our leadership team members, some of our alumni, and it's an activity that we started last summer with some of the group discussions with some of our seniors. Because we're coming up to our 100th, we're trying to integrate camper feedback and help them to start looking at the longevity within our organization. And the new building that we built, that is sort of the talking point of it, because one of the things, our goal with this building is also to make it partially a building that exhibits some of our archives, and not just our archives, but archives that once it's printed and not the exact original, campers can manipulate, play with, and we can also exhibit within it, so that we're tying sort of our legacy within this building. And one of the things that I would say when we started this project, now I work with my parents. My father is a carpenter. He is has very strong opinions on how things should look and how things should be. And as do I. I also have my own opinions, and this became a father-daughter project, which I knew from the beginning, and he did too, that it would be maybe a tough project. But some of the things I learned from him is his respect and his care on our site, that he honored the people before him by making newer buildings look like those older buildings. So if you walk around camp, it is difficult to tell which buildings are old, which buildings are new. Some of the things that he knew, as what Joe was pointing out, is that the buildings that were built in the 1920s are far better constructed than the buildings that were built in the 1940s. And we're currently taking down most of those buildings in the 1940s and rebuilding them to look like the buildings in the 1920s. So when we had the project with the new building, I was very excited about this sort of exhibit room, this new teaching kitchen, this new staff lounge. I was very excited about it, and I really wanted to honor it. And I got excited about the design on the outside to make it look different. And that was one of the things that my father taught me, that we do not want this to stick out like a sore thumb. We want this to blend. And he worked very hard to work with the landscape. He wanted it to look like it has always been there. And on a site that's so small, with a floor plan of 60 by 40, which is quite large, he did a fantastic job by keeping certain trees and rocks and creating paths that felt very, very natural. Now, the inside, when you walk in, is different than any of our other buildings. It is white, it is bright, it's an aha as you walk in. And that's my contribution, in the sense of, I wanted it to feel like we were outside. I wanted to have that feeling compared to our other buildings, where it's quite dark and dim and small windows, because in the 1920s, that's what they did. They made very small openings for windows, etc. I want something that was wonderful if it was raining and we had to go inside. It felt like we were actually outside. So having that understanding of your purpose of your camp, having an understanding of not just looking at archery as archery and how can you repurpose it and when could you change things, and involving people that are in different parts of your community, such as your alumni and your staff and your campers, to bring them in on the conversation, helps, of course, as Joe was saying, that, we are limited, and it helps us have those ideas. And the ideas for the building, of course, was executed by my father, where I talked with him, but my inspiration came from my campers and from my staff members. And from me, because I really love design. And Pinterest and design magazines.
Well, and I think it's important that your camp or facility, if you're going to have one, should have a look, right? It shouldn't look like, you're just, there's a camp I know, no names, that I would visit, and they had a group of volunteers who would just sort of run roughshod over the the staff, and they would be like, great, so-and-so is getting rid of a garage. We're going to move it on site. And so you have all these little huts and buildings that had no real purpose. And I think I think when you get a building when you get things that look similar, it's cohesive. And set aside for campers, because a lot of times campers could care less. It's all of the other groups you're going to try and attract who want to feel like it looks right, to feel like it's a cohesive space. So yeah, the look is important. It's also just aesthetics. So I'm not going to change the look of every building to match the new one until I have all the other repairs done.
Right. I also think, Joe, that one of the worst mistakes, and this comes up in everything. It comes up in staff training. It comes up in our marketing communications. The worst mistake you can make as a summer camp is to look sloppy or to look unintentional, because who would trust you to look after your kids if you're sloppy about your communication, if if your buildings are all mismatched and haphazardly all over the place. It's all part of the package.
Yeah.
Stacy, what do you see in terms of issues coming, things we need to be aware of or thinking of, et cetera?
Yeah, so sort of a branch that I would add to this tree that goes in a bit of a different direction is I've been part of some really interesting conversations about the role that technology and access to technology plays at camp. So far as some organizations saying it is high on our priority list to put Wi-Fi in every single building on our camp property in the next 3 years. And just some really interesting conversations happening about the expectations of our customers, who are, our campers, our parents, our school groups and the administrators of those groups. If you have corporate groups coming out to your camp, that more and more the expectation of either cell phone signal or Wi-Fi or both is becoming less of a comfort item and more of really a requirement for the way things happen and where people feel safe. And if people don't feel safe at your camp, then they're not coming to your camp, or they're not sending their kids to your camp. And we're at that turning point where access to that technology is becoming a minimum requirement for people to feel safe in a lot of places, in a lot of cultures, in a lot of communities. And so that's been some interesting conversations. And I know there are still camps out there that are very much, we're unplugged, there's no access here, and that's a point that they're proud of. And so I would really encourage camps anywhere across that spectrum of technology to have some tough conversations and challenge your current your current outlook on that, to see is that a direction that we want to or we need to go. And I think that has overlay to not just the concept of people feeling safe, but programmatically too. There's a lot of really interesting things we can do programmatically when we have that technology connection. So another kind of layer to look at and think about.
And I think that's such a great wording. I love, Stacy, that you talk about it being about safety, the feeling, the perception of safety. Because yes, technology is a hard issue. Cell phones, we all know, is something that is causing problems for our kids and our staff. But I think, I was going to say, even for recruiting staff members, access to technology or access to the internet is going to be a big part of recruiting for college-age staff. But I love your thinking. It's about feeling safe. It's going to be part of what makes them feel safe in that. I also think that, and this is kind of one of the bigger issues that I see coming, is that if we are having trouble recruiting college-age staff, then we have to find staff in other places. And maybe that having access to the internet allows you to bring in older adults who might be coming for shorter periods of time, might be coming with their families, et cetera. I'd love the camps that have worked hard to make sure that they're intergenerational and that there are grandparents there and old retired alumni there and families, all that stuff. I think it's so thoughtful. And if we're having trouble with this college age stuff, then we have to be ready to offer a different experience, and some of those things will be required. Dan, what are some issues for you that you think we should be thinking of considering going forward?
Yeah, just going back to the technology thing that Stacy brought up. It's funny. I wrote my master's thesis on plugging. Like, I'm a huge proponent of putting phones away. I think it's vital important to take tech holidays. Yeah, I agree with everything Stacy said. And I think it's important to really note that the needs are often beyond our thoughts. And I'll give a tangible example. So Frost Valley, the camp I previously worked at, no cell service, Wi-Fi, notoriously sparse, and they like it that way. And yet we had a school that didn't want to come up because there was a family that tracked their child's diabetes using Wi-Fi. And this was actually a crossroads for us, because we prioritize on health, we prioritize on youth development, we prioritize on taking care of people and meeting where they're at. And we actually were able to get Wi-Fi to her cabin, and she was able to come on a trip, and normally doesn't go to places because of this lack of safety and technology. So, you could turn the Wi-Fi off, you could have channels to still keep your camp intact. But I think it is important to note that there is technologies well beyond our current thoughts that are coming down the pipe that require people to have access to Wi-Fi, whether it's health monitoring or being accessible at all times. It is definitely perceived safety, but also a health issue for a lot of people. So it just to kind of see that from a different angle, and see that from somebody that really does pride on taking that technology break and what camp's for. I think the biggest thing is just to bring an outside facilitator when you start really digging into this. You have to understand that you're part of your camp, and that even though you might have some amazing ideas inside you, people see you as a professional, or see you as part of the camp and don't want to offend you. So to have an outside facilitator, somebody that can challenge even you in a room, at the end of the day, they know who's cutting the check, so you don't have to worry about it. But at the same point in time, it shows that you're really intentional in the design process. I really think that you should have experts on each little part, consulting in some ways. For instance, the first time I ever worked on a building, I never thought about which direction the sun was coming up in. And yet that matters completely with window placement, because if you have your building facing the wrong direction, and all of a sudden those windows hit with tons of sunlight and warms your building up 20 degrees, that could bring quite a bit of savings to you. It could also change how the building's being used. So I think it's important to really bring in the experts and not cut the corners when it comes to designing buildings. Just one other thought is I visited Camp Coniston. It's a Y camp in New Hampshire. John Tilley runs it. John's been there for over 20 years at this point. Truly, in terms of looking at design and buildings, that is where he's really shined. And he recommends this book, How Buildings Learn What Happens After They're Built. And I have yet to read it, but it's got amazing reviews on Amazon, but just talks about how buildings will change to the people that are there. And it's not necessarily an architecture book in terms of design and little nuances, but it's more changing about how you think about buildings. But that's just kind of a loose end I wanted to bring up.
I think right to add on to Dan's, the book that I thought of originally, right when you said that, was a pattern language, which I'm sure I've used as a tool of the week in the past. But a pattern language, which I found on Cool Tools many years ago, literally talks about, from conception, how you use space, and not just building space like your house, but also like how you design, a courtyard, how you design somewhere where people will meet. I think the idea is that, and when you're planning a new building capital-wise, you need to think about all of those possible uses, as Gab was saying, right? And the reality is, this is an architectural trend. When you go and you see new buildings being built, very few of them are very purpose-built. They're built for multi-purpose, because that's where the greatest variety is. If you go to any church that's been built recently in the past 10 years, you won't see pews. You won't see You won't see those things because that room can be used for many different things. And the one thing I would really recommend is what I call roll-in ready. Be it the Americans with Disability Acts, be it the Ontario Disability, right? Like just make your building so future-proof that no one's ever going to come back at you on it. And that's one of the challenges. Is space is certainly an issue. If you only have 14 acres, then you probably want to if you're going to build a building, you want it to be big and new, and your only chance at some point is to build up, right? A basement and 2 floors. Having recently gone through a fire code issue, I will stick with single-story buildings for the rest of my career here at Pierce Williams because A, we have 180 acres, and B, fire code is very different for a single-story building than it is for a 2-story or a 3-story building. I think the other thing that we don't often take into account with improving camp is the additional costs that many of those things bring. When you build a building permit in Ontario, when you pull a building permit for your building in Ontario, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation automatically gets that, and thus your property tax will go up if they reassess you. So if you're building $1 million building and you got $1 million donation and you're on budget, all of those things, you're still losing money because you're not going to be able to afford the additional $3,000 to $4,000 per year in property tax, utilities, upkeep for the lifetime of that building. And I think that I think the greater the flexibility on a building, that's good for your facility. But I also think that you need to have someone just to walk you through the fact that there's all these other costs that you just can't imagine at this moment in time. And I think that's where, or other things that you wouldn't have experienced. So like the idea of, on Facebook right now, there is a conversation about whether to put in a basement or not in a new building. And I would say that if you're on a small site and that's your only way to gain space, then that's your option. Maybe the answer is yes, right? If you're in bedrock in the Muskoka area of Ontario, putting a basement in is going to actually cost you a lot more than not, because you have to dig into it. I would argue that every basement, and I was in a lot of basements this summer. I toured 10 camps on the East Coast in Canada, and every basement I was in had a dehumidifier going, and every basement smelt like it was wet. And they're like, well, they just didn't build it right. And I'm like, well, at what point do we say that every builder doesn't build a basement right when you see a dehumidifier in every space, right? And I just, my case for it would be that if you're looking at it from a disability standpoint, can they get into the basement? And in the future, is somebody going to make you as an employer make sure that every space is accessible? Are you putting a giant ramp, right? Like, and is your second story necessary? Because you're going to either have to have an elevator. This is where a lot of churches are going under, because the way the act reads with public buildings, which a church would fall under, is they need elevators so that people can get into each area. And churches built in the 1800s they didn't think about it, right? Like you immediately walk in the door and there's stairs up and stairs down. It's just, so I think this idea of having someone with a bit more of the pragmatic, is that the right use of that word? A pragmatic approach to your ideas. Because it's great to build a brand new building, but if it doesn't get used properly, or it just doesn't meet your needs anymore, then it's just a giant waste of time and money.
I want to bring this right around and start to wrap us up here. And so I would challenge each of you, and I'll start us off here. What are some issues that you see coming that others may not, or may be sort of on the periphery of discussion? And I have 3 to start us off. I think one issue that's coming that we are ignoring at our peril, and it will become non-optional very soon, is the issue of staff pay. that a lot of camps have got away with underpaying their staff, and that is going to affect your pricing. It's going to affect everything. But I know in Canada it's going to be an issue in the next several years that camps will have to pay their staff better. I know that there are camps who have current legal requirements to pay their staff better that are not, and I think that that's going to come back to haunt them at some point. So staff pay, I think, is an issue that camp isn't addressing. It's related to this future topic. I think that camps have to be super conscious of the fact that summers are going to be hotter, and that although we like the rustic, no cell phone look of things, I think, are going to have to build all buildings going forward with air conditioning in them. And furthermore, that summers are going to be stormier, and that we need to be building and future-proofing ourselves in the way of storm shelters, better buildings. I don't think it's going to stay acceptable for parents, especially those who don't have the history and that feeling of, well, I loved the tent cabins when I was a kid, that at some point we're going to have to move to sturdy buildings that, again, like Stacy said, feel safe to people and or are ready for storms and have air conditioning in them. And I agree that doesn't feel like campy if people grew up at a more traditional overnight camp. But I think that's things that we're going to have to think of. Anything else you can think of, Stacy, that would be issues coming that you see?
No, I mean, I talked about technology already and the access to Wi-Fi, and I think that's the biggest one in my mind. And then ditto to what you shared there, Travis. I think most of you know that I'm big on the millennial mom audience and what their expectations are. And so I think in terms of the comfort and expectation for parents of what they consider safe is definitely shifting, as you mentioned. And so really, I encourage all camps to, if there's that moment where you're rolling your eyes at something a parent is complaining about, it's time to look in the mirror and think, okay, well, is there something on our side here that we can make this more accessible to what their expectations are? And so kind of that sense check or that temperature check anytime those moments come up. So agree with what you shared, Travis.
Excellent. Thank you. That's probably a great spot to wrap us up on this. I want to thank all of you for your contributions on this. And therefore, move us on to our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
If you are new, you follow Stacy Simpson and you're coming to join the CampHacker podcast for the first time because you love Stacy and go wherever she goes, our tool of the week moment is when we ask each co-host to bring a tool that makes them a better camp director. And Stacy, for your followers, what's your tool of the week?
Yeah, so for my millions of followers who have tuned in this week to the podcast, so I am sharing a really cool resource. I mentioned earlier that for me, working a lot with Girl Scout camps, we have awesome resources that come from our national organization. And there's a branch of that that's called the Girl Scout Research Institute, which is actually separate from our national organization, but related, obviously. And they do really cool research about Girl Scouts, but also about girls in general in the United States. And what really gets nerdy and fun is when we can compare those data sets between Girl Scouts and non-Girl Scouts and all that good stuff. But they have a recent research study and report and findings that came out just in November that's called Today's Girls, Tomorrow's Entrepreneurs. And it's specifically about how girls see themselves and their world from an entrepreneurial mindset and what they are looking toward for their futures from that entrepreneurial framework. So I'm super nerdy about girls leadership and about entrepreneurship and running small businesses. So like it's a collision of all my favorite things. So you can go check out the research study and a bunch of resources and information related to it, either at girlscouts.org/research. And it's the first one because it's the most recent on their list. Or there's a really cool site called whygirlscouts.org. So it's WHY, not Y like the YMCA, but WHY girlscouts.org/success. And it'll show you the findings of that research there as well. It's really exciting to see how girls are looking at themselves and entrepreneurship in our world.
Great start to the tool of the week. Thanks, Stacy. Gab, what's your tool?
My tool, I was just going to say, Stacy, so awesome. I just forwarded that link to one of my staff members, and I said, tomorrow morning, we are going over this awesome site. I'm going to be going over it while I hold my handy mug, which is my tool of the week. There's a story to this. So I lost my favorite camp tumbler maybe a year and a half ago. And I'm very particular about things. And it took me a very long time to find a new water bottle. So much so that it took me about a year. And I called my mother when I found it. And I said, I found my water bottle. And she said, oh, is it all black? I said, yes. And she says, is there a logo on it? I go, it's really small and it's gray, so it's going to be okay. Because she knew that I'm very picky. So I'm extremely picky. I've done my research. I love this thing. It's a great water bottle. It's a great tea/coffee mug. I put my tea in it the night before. I close it, and then I'll take the tea bag out. And then when I get up in the morning, I go to work and I open it, and it is perfect temperature. So it's a Kinto mug. It's going to set you back about $45, but it's worth it because you might not lose it because you love it. So that's mine.
Perfect. I love that one. Thank you. Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, I was on Facebook. I was on the American Camp Association, New York, New Jersey's Facebook page, and they were posting books that were other camp directors had recommended. And there was one on there called The Energy Bus by John Gordon. I recently read it, and it was pretty short. I thought it was pretty good. For me, I've been managing people for quite some time. And as you do this longer and longer, you forget what it's like to be in the role for the first time. And for me, that is a reason I read, not only to sharpen myself, but also to remind me of where I came from. And this is just a really good book for, I would say, first-time managers or managers that have been managing for a little bit of time and really are struggling with their team. But the focus of the book, it's written like a parable in some ways, more like a narrative, but basically just kind of breaks 10 rules for attracting positivity and energy in your work and in also your life, and just easy to read and enjoyable, and made me think a lot about how we're training our staff and how we're onboarding our managers. But yeah, quick read as well too. So The Energy Bus by John Gordon. And the show notes will put there's a cliff notes to the 10 rules of your life for the ride of your life. And if you don't have the time to read it, you can just read that and get a good understanding of it.
It's perfect. My tool of the week is something that has come up in some other work I'm doing this month, and it is about encouraging conversations in meetings. And we talked about brainstorming and some of that, and some of the work I'm doing with Seth Godin's Alt MBA coaching this month has really reiterated a great Michael Brandwein lesson that I want to make sure that everybody knows and uses. And that is that when we ask a question to a group, they are, most of the times, you're going to have the same people answer or the same people jump up to answer, and that we need to work hard to make sure that everybody gets a chance to answer. And sometimes that involves some very specific techniques, many of which you know, but I just wanted to make sure that you were reminded of or introduced to the idea of WIBIT, which is a Michael Brandwein style acronym for write it before you talk. And if you make people take the time to do that, then you have some more thoughtful answers, for one, or you also get some other people to answer questions that might not if you just open up to the floor over and over again. And it has been a great technique, so much so that we had permanent kind of poster-sized cards that you could hold up as a camp leader when you're doing staff training, and you just hold it up and everybody would yell at WIBIT and then go to work on the question that you ask. So that's mine. How about you, Joe?
My tool of the week is a podcast. I don't know how many episodes there are, but it's called Dolly Parton's America. This is a weird tool, but it goes to the fact that I encourage people to think outside of camp. And the one sentence, so Dolly Parton America comes to us from the creators of Radiolab, which is another great podcast if you don't listen to it. And the one sentence that really defines it is, in this intensely divided moment of the United States, one of the few things everyone still seems to agree on is Dolly Parton. But why? And it dives into that. And it's a fascinating look into a world that I simply didn't know existed. I was in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, which is home to Dollywood, in November on our way to Asheville for the Great Gathering Conference. And this podcast it's fascinating, and all the things that makes my mind stretch a little bit to fully understand someone who, as also says in the description, was the butt of many boob jokes, but also has now turned into an iconic feminine icon who doesn't agree with feminism. It's a great podcast when you listen to it. So that is my recommendation. And I'm going to sneak in a second one. A Chrome extension called U Blacklist. You ever search for anything and the same site, so you're searching for an image and Pinterest keeps popping up on you? U Blacklist, you can block it. You can block any list from coming up in search, and it's brilliant. So U Blacklist.
Thank you. I didn't go last on the tool of the week this time because I also have a second one. This one just came up for me because of our topic. And when I was planning my tool of the week, this didn't come up. But as we were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so relevant to the topic. I have been watching on the new Disney Plus channel the Imagineers story from Disney. It's a 5-part documentary series on the Imagineers. And it's intense. It's so great for breaking your brain open on planning for the future and building with intention and going to the next level. I think we all can't be so well versed in the customer service of Disney and the thoughtfulness of Disney, but this one really just shows you. And just the art involved in everything that the Imagineers do is so wonderful. And for those of you who don't know, the Imagineers and the Disney company aren't necessarily those who make the movies. They're the ones that make the physical things, the parks and the experiences that we all know from Disney. And such a great window into that. So heartily recommend the Imagineers story. 5-part, so 5-hour documentary on their stuff. Also interesting to realize that Disney had a lot more ups and downs than probably most people know these days or remember these days. So that was really cool. Excellent. So thank you all. So if you are interested in any of the things we've mentioned, we've thrown in some extra tools, we've thrown in some extra references. You can thank Matt Hansberger, our editor and producer, for putting the show notes together from our show. And also you can find all those things at camphacker.tv/podcast. And so these show notes and every other thing. Unfortunately, Dan had to go. So the other thing you can find in our show notes is how to get a hold of Dan Weir if you have any follow-up questions from his stuff. But Stacy, if people have questions and want to follow up with you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, thanks. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. My name is Stacy Simpson, STACIE. I also have a website at stacysimpsonconsulting.com. And I run a podcast called All Things Girl Scouts. So if you're interested in Girl Scout stuff, you can find me there too.
Thanks for being on, Stacy. We really appreciate it. It's great to have you back.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Joe?
If people want to follow me, they can do that through 2 websites, one being the Pierce Williams website, which is campisbetter.com. Life is good, camp is better. And if you want to find a giant archive of blogs from as far away as 16 to 17 years ago and free downloads of the Camp Counselor Manifesto poster, you can go to yoyojoe.com, yoyojoe.com.
Thank you. And everybody should check out Joe's Camp Counselor Manifesto. It's fun to see it in lots of different places and say to myself, I know him.
Thanks.
Gab?
You can follow me on Instagram, Gabrielle Rail with 2 L's, or you can check out where I work at waro.com, OUAREAU.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So thank you all for that. I wanted to say also thank you to the people on Patreon who sponsored the CampHacker podcast. So there is a loyal group who've been with us for years who have paid to have Matt go through and write up good show notes. And they are such a blessing to this community for investing in the CampHacker podcast. And a couple of recent and new patrons that we're really excited about. So thank you to those people who make the CampHacker show possible. We're grateful. One other thing that you can do, like we invite you to support us on Patreon. I usually don't make too big a deal about that, and I'm grateful that Matt does it in the other parts of when he edits the show. But welcome that, of course. Also, just one simple little thing. If you go to ratethispodcast.com/camp, you can leave us a rating that will spread out across many different podcast apps and things. We have often invited you to leave a review on iTunes. This will spread it out over Stitcher, etc. So ratethispodcast.com/camp. You can find us there. And as I say, show notes at camphacker.tv/podcast. Thanks for the evening, friends.
The CampHacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening. CampHacker, bringing your world into focus.
Podcast. Thanks for the evening, friends.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.